The thing about duty is that it doesn't care what time you fell asleep. It doesn't care if your chest feels hollow or if you spent the night staring at the ceiling, counting the cracks. Duty just shows up at your door, cold and polite, and waits for you to put on your boots. I learned that from him. The old king, I mean, not from anything he said. He wasn't the type for speeches, but he was the type who stood when others sat, who walked into rooms that were already on fire just to see who needed carrying out. And I love him for it. There, I said it. Even now, even here, standing in the small hours of a London morning with the tourists still asleep and the city smelling of rain and diesel, I loved him. Not the way the papers wrote about, the great man, the sovereign, the steady hand. I loved the way he tapped his fingers on the armrest when he was bored. The way he pronounced yes like it cost him something. The way he looked at the garden at dawn when he thought no one was watching and for a moment looked less like a king and more like a boy who'd lost something he couldn't name. That was 4 years ago. He's gone now. Tuberculosis of all things. In this century, they said it was a rare strain. I say it was a rare man, and the world just found a quiet way to take him back. My name is Sergeant Finian Cole, Royal Guard, Household Division, and I have spent every morning since his death walking the same corridor outside the private apartments, pretending I don't notice the empty chair by the window. But today is different. Today, the heir arrives. Not the heir they wanted. The other one. The younger son. Prince Julian. The one who ran off to Canada 7 years ago to paint landscapes and date actresses and pretend he wasn't third in line. Nobody thought he'd ever sit on anything harder than a bar stool. Then, his brother's helicopter went down over the channel. Then, his father's lungs filled up with fluid in March. And suddenly, Julian Ashworth, age 34, unkempt, unmarried, and notoriously hungover in most of his press photos, is the last living Ashworth with a claim to the crown. They're calling him the reluctant king in the tabloids. I call him a man who wasn't there, because I was there, in the final months. I stood guard outside the king's bedroom door while he coughed into a handkerchief and told his nurses to stop fussing. I watched the queen, his wife, weep in the hallway, her hand over her mouth, making no sound at all. I watched the elder son, the perfect one, fly in from every corner of the earth just to hold his father's hand for an hour before flying out again. And Julian? Julian sent a postcard. I saw myself. A postcard of a moose. On the back, in lazy cursive, Dad, heard you're under the weather. Drink more water. Love, Jay. The king laughed when he read it. Actually laughed. Then he coughed for 10 minutes straight, and when he finally caught his breath, he said, "That boy will break my heart twice. Once by leaving, once by coming back too late." He came back too late. By 3 days. I was on duty the morning Julian finally arrived. He walked through the gates of Buckingham Palace like a man approaching a crime scene. No entourage, no security, just a duffel bag over one shoulder and a pair of boots that had seen better weather. His hair was longer than regulation. His jaw was shadowed. He looked nothing like the polished photographs from his brother's wedding. "Sergeant," he said to me, because I was the first uniform he saw. "Your Highness," I replied. He flinched, actually flinched, like the title was a wasp that had landed on his neck. "Where is he?" "The king is in the chapel, sir. The private chapel. He passed 3 days ago." Julian stood there for a long moment. The wind picked up. A siren wailed somewhere beyond the gates. And then he did something I will never forget. He took off his boots, left them on the steps, and walked inside in his socks. I followed at a distance. Protocol demanded it, but I kept back far enough that he wouldn't hear my footsteps. Because I knew he was about to fall apart, and I couldn't bear to be a witness to that. Some grief is private. Some grief belongs only to the person bleeding from it. He stopped outside the chapel doors. His hand hovered over the brass handle, and he whispered something. I couldn't hear the words, but I heard the shape of them, the broken shape. Then he opened the door, stepped inside, and closed it behind him. He stayed in there for 4 hours. When he came out, his eyes were red, but his face was dry. He looked at me again. "You're the one who wrote to me." It wasn't a question. I didn't deny it. In the king's final weeks, I had sent 3 letters to Julian's address in Toronto. Short ones. Your father asked for you. Your father is not well. Your father is asking again. None of them received a reply. I read them. Julian said quietly. I just couldn't. I couldn't be the son he wanted me to be. So I stayed away. Figured that was kinder. I didn't answer. What was there to say? That his father had called his name on the last night? That the old man had reached out his hand toward the door, toward the son who never came, and whispered Jules before the nurse eased him back onto the pillow? Some things aren't for telling. You loved him, Julian said. Not a question again. I swallowed. He was my king, sir. That's not what I asked. The corridor was very quiet. Somewhere above us, a clock ticked. I thought about lying. I thought about the uniform, the oath, the 1,000 rules that said a guardsman does not speak of his heart to a prince. Yes, I said. I loved him. Julian nodded slowly. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out a crumpled pack of cigarettes, and lit one right there in the hallway. Against every rule, against every protocol, he blew a plume of smoke toward the ceiling and said, Then you and I have something in common, Sergeant. We both loved a man who was impossible to keep. He walked away after that, left his boots on the steps, left his smoke hanging in the air, left me standing there with my chest cracked open and my duty still strapped to my shoulders like a second spine. That was 3 weeks ago. Tomorrow, Julian is crowned, and I have been assigned to his personal detail. His heart belongs to the dead king, but his duty to the living heir. I don't know which one is going to kill me first. Part 2, the second, watch the morning of the coronation as gray. Not the dramatic gray of a storm, but the exhausted gray of a city that hasn't slept. I've been awake since 3, not because of nerves, because of a dream. In the dream, the old king is sitting in his chair by the window. He looks healthy. He looks like he did 10 years ago, before the cough started, before the weight fell off him. He's wearing a cardigan I remember, the gray one with a missing button. And he's looking at me with that half smile he had, the one that said he knew something you didn't. You'll take care of him, he said in the dream. Not a question. I don't know how, I replied. You do. You just don't want to. Then he reached out and touched my hand. His fingers were warm. They were always warm, even at the end. And he said, He's not me, Finn. Don't expect him to be. That's not fair to either of you. I woke up with my hand still open, reaching for nothing. The palace is chaos by 6. Staff running everywhere. Flower arrangements being rearranged. A woman in heels I don't recognize is yelling about place cards. I stand against the wall in the north corridor and watch it all like a fish watching the surface. My job is simple today. Stay within 10 feet of the new king at all times. Do not let anyone get close. Do not let anyone hand him anything. Do not let him wander off alone, because apparently that's something he does now. I found him at 6:15, not in his dressing room, not in the throne room, in the kitchen, the palace kitchen. He was standing in front of the industrial refrigerator in his bathrobe, eating yogurt straight from the tub with a spoon. Morning, Sergeant, he said without looking up. Your Highness, you're supposed to be getting dressed. Am I? He took another bite. Funny, I thought I was supposed to be getting crowned. Nobody mentioned the dressing part. I waited. He'd been like this for 3 weeks. Jokes that weren't funny. Silence that went on too long. He'd show up to meetings 10 minutes late and apologize in a way that made it clear he wasn't sorry at all. He'd sign documents without reading them. He'd ask his private secretary, a woman named Margaret who looked like she hadn't smiled since the 90s, Do I really have to do this? About everything. The staff hated him. I could see it in their tight smiles and the way they whispered when he passed. They missed the elder son, the reliable one. They missed the old king, the steady one. Julian was none of those things. Julian was a mess. A tall, handsome, sad-eyed mess who wore yesterday's shirt and called his therapist at 2 in the morning from the palace landline. But I saw other things, too. I saw him stop to thank a cleaner by name. I saw him ask the stable hands about their children. I saw him sit with a young guardsman who was crying in the garden. The boy's mother had died, and Julian just sat there, not saying anything, just being there, until the boy ran out of tears. He wasn't his father. That was the problem, and it was also the point. You're staring, Julian said, putting the yogurt back in the fridge. Apologies, sir. Don't apologize. I'm used to it. Everyone stares at the disaster. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Do you think he'd be proud of me? Today, I mean, if he could see. I didn't have to ask who he meant. I think, I said carefully, that he would be proud of you for showing up. Julian's face did something complicated. His jaw tightened. His eyes went somewhere far away. That's a diplomatic answer. I'm a guardsman, Your Highness. Not a diplomat. No, he said softly. You're not. You're the one who loved him, which makes you the only honest person in this building. He walked past me then, close enough that I could smell his soap. Something cedar and smoke. He paused at the door and looked back. Stay close today, Sergeant. I have a feeling I'm going to need someone who knew him. Someone who remembers what this is actually for. I'll be there, sir. He nodded. And then he was gone, bathrobe and all, leaving me alone with an open refrigerator and a heart that was starting to feel like it belonged to two men instead of one. The coronation itself is a blur. Westminster Abbey is cold despite the crowds. The cameras are everywhere. Julian wears the robes like they itch, which they probably do, and he stumbles over one line of the oath. Just one, but the internet will notice. They always notice. I stand near the altar, close enough to see his hand shake when they place the crown on his head. It's too big. The crown is always too big. Someone should have padded it better. It slips slightly to the right, and Julian reaches up and adjusts it himself, which is not protocol, and which makes the archbishop's eye twitch, and which is exactly the kind of thing his father would have done. My chest aches. Afterward, there's a reception. Champagne. Laughter that sounds like glass breaking. I watch Julian move through the crowd like a man walking through water. He shakes hands. He smiles. He says the right things. But his eyes keep drifting to the windows, to the gray sky, to anywhere but here. Around 9, he slips away. I follow. He doesn't go far. Just to the small chapel. The private one. The one where his father lay. The one where he spent those 4 hours in his socks. He doesn't go inside this time. He just stands outside the door, his crown still on his head, his robes dragging on the floor. I can't do this, he says. Not to me. To the door. To the ghost behind it. I stand 10 feet behind him. Silent. Waiting. You should be here. Not me. He was the one who knew how to do this. He was the one who was good at it. Julian's voice cracks. I'm just the spare. The backup. The one nobody wanted until they had no choice. I should say something proper. Something about duty and honor and the line of succession. But that's not what comes out. He was terrified every single day, I say. Julian turns. His eyes are wet. Your father, I continue. The great king. The steady hand. He told me once, after a state dinner, that he spent the whole meal wondering if he was saying the right thing. He said he felt like a fraud. Every day. He said the only thing that kept him going was the thought that maybe, if he just kept showing up, eventually he'd figure it out. Julian stares at me. He never figured it out, I say. He just kept showing up anyway. And that's why everyone loved him. Not because he was perfect, because he tried. The chapel is silent. Somewhere above us, the same clock ticks. You really did love him, Julian whispers. Yes. And now? I look at him. At the crown sitting crooked, at the man underneath it, raw and unfinished and so clearly out of his depth. Now I'm here, I say. It's not an answer. It's not an answer. Julian holds my gaze for a long time. Then he does something strange. He reaches up, takes off the crown, and holds it in both hands like a bowl. Stay, he says. Stay with me tonight. I don't want to be alone. And because my heart is a traitor and my duty is a chain and I'm so tired of pretending I don't feel things I shouldn't feel, I say yes. Part 3, the third watch, nothing happens that night. Not what you're thinking. We sit in his private sitting room, the one that used to belong to his mother before she moved to the country. Julian takes off the robes. He pours 2 glasses of whiskey from a decanter that hasn't been used in years. He kicks off his shoes. He looks less like a king and more like a man who's just run a marathon he didn't train for. Tell me about him, Julian says. The real him, not the version in the biographies. So I do. I tell him about the time the old king got lost in the palace gardens because he refused to ask for directions. about the way he used to feed the corgis scraps under the table when the queen wasn't looking, about the night he sat up with a young guardsman whose girlfriend had left him, and how he didn't say anything wise, just listened, just stayed. I tell Julian about the last week, the cough that wouldn't stop, the way his father's hands shook when he tried to sign documents, the morning he looked at me and said, "I'm not afraid of dying, Sergeant. I'm afraid of leaving things unsaid." Did he say anything about me? Julian asks. His voice is very small. I hesitate, but he deserves the truth. He said you would break his heart twice, I say. Once by leaving, once by coming back too late. Julian closes his eyes. A tear slides down his cheek. He doesn't wipe it away. I was a coward, he says. I thought if I stayed away, I wouldn't have to watch him fade. I thought I could remember him the way he was. Strong, healthy, immortal. He opens his eyes. But I just missed the chance to say goodbye. And now I have to be him. I have to be the king. And I don't know how to be anyone except the person who ran away. I set down my whiskey. You don't have to be him, I say. You just have to be you. The you that stayed with the crying guardsman. The you that knows the cleaners' names. The you that showed up, even though it was late, even though it hurt. Julian looks at me. Really looks. Like he's seeing me for the first time. You're in love with a dead man, he says. Not cruel, just true. Yes. And yet you're here, with me. My duty is to the living heir. Is that what this is? He gestures between us. Duty. The room is quiet. The fire crackles. Somewhere outside, London goes on living, indifferent to the two broken men inside these walls. I don't know what this is, I admit. I only know that when I'm near you, I don't feel like I'm betraying him. I feel like I'm honoring him, because he would want you to have someone who sees you. The real you, not the crown. Julian's breath catches, and then he reaches out, slowly, giving me time to pull away. His hand stops just above mine, not quite touching. I'm not asking you to stop loving him, he says. I would never ask that. He was worth loving. But I'm asking you to stay. Not as a guard, as something else. Something I don't have a name for yet. I think of the dream. He's not me, Finn. Don't expect him to be. I'm not him, Julian says, as if reading my mind. I'll never be him. I'll probably mess this up. I'll probably say the wrong thing at the wrong time, and cause of scandal, and make the papers hate me even more. But I'll show up. Every day. I'll try. That's all I can promise. It's not a grand speech. It's not poetry. But it's real. And real is what I need. I turn my hand over. Palm up. An invitation. Julian's fingers close around mine. His hand is warm. Not like his father's. Different. Rougher. Unpracticed at gentleness. But learning. Okay, I say. I'll stay. He exhales. A long, shaky breath. Like he's been holding it since the moment he walked into that chapel 3 weeks ago. We don't kiss. Not that night. We sit in the firelight, hands intertwined, two people who love the same man in different ways, trying to figure out what comes after. Outside, the guards change. Boots on stone. Orders given and received. The palace settles into its night rhythm. The same rhythm it's kept for centuries, indifferent to the hearts breaking and mending within its walls. I think about the old king, about his warm hands and his half smile and the way he said my name like it mattered. I think about the empty chair by the window. I think about the letters I wrote that never got answered, and the postcard of the moose, and the 4 hours in the chapel. And I think about Julian, about his crooked crown and his yogurt at dawn and his terrible, beautiful, insufficient promise to try. My heart belongs to the dead king, but my hand is holding the living one. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough.